When life goes sideways, the cracks tend to expose two things at once: what's breaking and what's trying to come through. Today's guest is Liz Dapo, a professional puppeteer, voice actor, fabricator, director, and the kind of creative who can make a cardboard typewriter a monster with big feelings, or a frog who teaches kids English to feel more alive than most people you meet in real life. And so that's why I'm really excited to talk with Liz today. In this episode, we're going to talk about the art of reinvention. We're going to talk about the tenderness of burnout, the strange magic of letting go, and why performance still gives her butterflies after 20 years.
I was nervous because it's always interesting to share a piece of yourself. And when you're an actor, performer, you're sharing a piece of yourself through somebody else's filter, right? Through that character's filter. So I'm excited and I'm a little nervous, but if something that I can say can help somebody else, then I'm always happy to try and, be an example.
Yeah, well, and I really love that. I'm fascinated by your story. I was lucky enough to be able to, hear a little bit of it when you came, and I heard you, share and present to the Women's Club of Winona, which was very, very cool. Probably the most interesting presentation I've ever heard present there. And I had more and more questions. And one of the things that you talked about in looking at sharing your story was you talked about your beginnings being not what most people would think of when they think of actor, voice actor, puppeteer, traveling the world. You grew up surrounded by agriculture and automotive work, and yet somehow you fell in love with puppetry. What was the first moment you thought, my life might look a little bit different from everyone else around me?
Well, I think, I grew up on a ranch in southern Colorado. My people are all very practical people, right? My grandfather was a cowboy. My grandmother worked the ranch hard. My mother's a nurse. My uncle is a tow truck driver. So the idea of being a creative in that space wasn't something that was really thought about. I was a little artist ever since I can remember. I was making cardboard puppets out of cereal boxes when I was little, and marionettes, and I would paper. My grandmother had this big, beautiful mirror, and every holiday I would make paper cutouts and stick them all over her mirror, and she was fine with that. But I think I was a little bit of an outlier because that's not how everybody else's brain worked, right? My grandfather, for the longest time, did not understand me and could not really get me. He would be like, you need to be like a picture on the wall. You're seen and not heard. You're loud and you're opinionated, and I can't deal with you right now. I loved Fraggle Rock. I loved Under the Umbrella Tree. I wasn't really a big Sesame Street person. It just wasn't what was, in my house, but I appreciated anything that was on television that had puppets in it, and I loved them. You get that with play, making your dinosaurs come alive, whatever it was. But it was kind of that combination of things. And then when I was in high school, my mom really wanted me to go into sciences. And I enjoyed them, but I was really still into arts. So I did my very first play, which was You Can't Take It With You. I think that was the moment that I knew that this was this is my thing.
Yeah. Well, did you know it was your thing in getting into puppetry and stuff like that? Or was it just, I know the arts, I know I belong in the performing arts in some way, shape, or form? I mean, that's kind of an unconventional path. So you're probably butting up against people who are trying to convince you otherwise. So what did that feel like?
I think I knew since I was little that art would somehow be my path, you know what I mean?
Mhm.
But in this little community, it was one of those well, women can't do certain things, or women can't, how much of my personality was developed by being told what I couldn't do was huge. So the more pushback that I was like, I think this is what I want to do, and the more pushback that I got, the more I was like, no, this is what I'm going to do. I did my first play, and then I was like, oh, I really like this, and I really like puppets. And then I got to be in this summer theater program where I made puppets for the children's theater camp, and I was like, "Uh-oh, this is what I really like to do. This is a combination of using my hands to make a thing and then still acting with it." There was this tiny theater that got started in our community, and it was a small professional theater, but run by these two lovely people, Fred and Harriet, and I think they saw something in me that then I could start to see in myself. My grandmother, I think, very much understood that I was gonna be different from the rest of my family.
She had that insight. She just knew.
She would buy me art supplies. I used to sit and just read books, listen to music and read books, and that was so beyond my grandfather. Like, he would yell at me
Mm.
for reading. He would say, "Come watch TV with us," and I'd be like, "No, I'm in the middle of a book." And my grandmother would be the one to be like, "No, no, let her do her thing. You know, she can do that. Let her do that." So, when I decided I was going to go for theater, I got into this program at Binghamton. It was far away from home. It was in New York. I wrote a paper about Punch and Judy, and I was like, "Oh, this is really interesting how puppets are being used. Okay, this is cool." And then did a couple of experimental pieces, like did a 2-minute Hamlet with all found object puppets, and was like, "Uh-oh, I really like this."
It does. You're like, if art was like, if going in this direction was already going to throw people off, even more unconventional, let's just get a little stranger here and
Yeah,
like,
let's
yeah.
let's hyper focus on a very niche performance. And so I graduated from Binghamton. I did both a technical and acting directing course at the same time, and got my first job working at Merry Go Round Playhouse in upstate New York. I was a carpenter and electrician. I worked on the children's tour. We were doing Little Shop of Horrors, which everybody knows, the plants and the musical. They brought the puppeteers in, they brought the puppets in, and it happened to be this guy named Mark Petrosino, who was the puppeteer. I was 22 and lingering around the outside edges. I was like, "Oh my God, this is great. I love this so much." At the end, he gave us all a talk and he walked us through it. And at the end of it, I walked over and I just, in this tiny little voice was like, "Can I try this? Can I try this puppet?" And he was like, so the huge Pod 4 puppet, like, he put me in it, he walked me through it, he told me how to make her move and work, and I went, "Okay, well, it's done." So I applied for grad school, Royal Central School of Speech and Drama in London. They have a puppetry course. I applied, I auditioned, I got in, and then after that, I was like, "Buckle up, baby, because here we go."
Yeah. You have come from Colorado, you've gone to the big city, you're doing the New York thing, and now you find yourself, now you're in London. What age are you at this point?
2023?
Yeah. So there's a lot of change. That's quite the plot twist, you know? London expands your creative world. You end up over there. What did this experience over there teach you about yourself?
It was one of the most mind-blowing, fantastic experiences I had. In hindsight, I think I was too young. I think that
Mhm.
I should have gotten more experience, more feet on the ground, doing more regional theater, trying to find more opportunities, and then gone. I was one of the youngest people on the course, and what I gained in experience was all of the people around me who had more experience than I did. And I got to be really good friends with this one lady named Emma, and she and I still work together to this day. Like, we formed our own little company in grad school. But
They were live streamed and stuff like that, you know? It's like when that would happen, it would be a little bit more stressful than like right now. I'm just like, whatever, I don't care. Even then, I just learned over the years because I had everything happen. As you can imagine, as years rolled by, I had everything from like a fire alarm go off. There was like a minor earthquake that happened one time while we were going live. Show must go on, right?
I think it did was it pushed me to be more creative and work outside of my own boundaries. I made these massive Mad Hatter and March hair puppets for this really cool project that was an estate that was being torn down, but every room had a different something happening in it. And we were in a room full of pink balloons having a tea party with these puppets. And I had no money to make anything out of. So I bought sponges, and I went to thrift stores, and I destroyed teddy bears to get fur. And you learned how to be creative because ultimately the thing that you made still, it worked towards what you wanted it to be. And
Wow.
I got to work with some really talented people, and the whole course was about devising work. So it's about what story do I want to tell? And our final thesis project was me and my friend Emma. We took Shakespeare's Midsummer and set it in a cemetery because one of the things that I was kind of focused on at the time was like, how do you process grief? How do you say goodbye? And what is this physical space supposed to be for us? It's not for the dead, it's for the living. It's for us to be able to hold on to memories.
Mhm.
So we used that text to make this promenade performance that went through a cemetery in Queens. And you walked the path, and Puck took you on, was kind of your guide, and you saw the story of lovers playing out in this place that is not necessarily about love, but it is about love. So the fairies were part of the cemetery. They were like the tombstones and the spirits. The last speech was Puck standing with everybody around him with like, little candles. If we shadows have offended, think on this and all is mended. And the impact of it, like we had people telling us that it was a kind of a spiritual journey for them and how it had changed their perspective. And it was fascinating, but that was the culmination of everything is kind of going, well, what else can puppets do? We know that they're good for children. We can teach empathy. We can teach emotional learning. Well, what can we do for adults too? What emotions and feelings can this inanimate object come to life evoke for adults as well? It's something that I still really am interested to explore. It's just, when do the opportunities present themselves?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's fascinating when I had the chance to sit and observe you, sharing a little bit about your story. At the end of it, you opened up for questions and everything. And a woman that was sitting there, she was just enamored with the puppets themselves. And you came over and you were demonstrating. And it was like she was transported to being a younger version of herself, and she really seemed to just naturally want to engage more, like, with emotion with this puppet, and it was fascinating to watch because I have to admit, I felt it too, like, I was
Yeah,
really into it.
it's really interesting because I think it gives adults the idea of play again. You
Yeah.
can be a little bit young and you can be a little bit silly and you don't have to have this facade of I know everything, I have everything together. With this little creature for 5 seconds, you can just have fun and be a kid again and find that joy that sometimes escapes us entirely. And you do see, I did a whole stint at the Philadelphia Zoo as a frog puppet. She was so cute. But the big moments were the adults getting lost in conversation with the puppet. Nobody looked at me. I was standing right next to this thing, and they would, won't fake the puppet. And that's so sweet to watch. But the other thing, and the thing that really moved me and kind of inspired some of the stuff that I did later was we had a day where there were kids who had autism, and it was like autism awareness at the zoo. But there was one child who was kind of nonverbal and got really fascinated with the frog. So I spent like a good 5 minutes just, they would touch and I would repeat and point and be like, I'm a frog and talking back and forth. The little kid said the word frog. The parents started crying because the child didn't really speak, but they spoke to the puppet. And that was what was interesting is like a puppet is easy to read. A puppet has one emotion on their face. They're just talking to you. Going forward, I ended up being a teaching artist and working with this fabulous company in Washington in the DC area called Artstream. And I worked really closely with this lady named Penny, who I adore. We would go into classrooms and you would teach with puppets, and kids that might not respond to people would respond to the puppet. Or if they had something to say, if they put the puppet on first, they could say it better. They could respond better. So it was that art kind of helping them be able to be part of this world. It was like a key to some kids to be able to engage. It was great work. It's hard work, and I applaud anybody who can continue to do it because you have your emotional highs and lows, but it's fascinating to see how a piece of fabric just shaped into something that we recognize as a monster or a creature or a person or a frog can have an impact on an adult or a kid, you know?
Yeah. Well, you seem to have this is kind of a strange transition. I'm realizing you the vaping out of my mouth, but you seem to have good luck with frogs. Like you did, like so you mentioned the frog,
I do.
and then you had, but you, I mean, one of your most success, I guess you can call it successful characters, because it's like the what is the widest used, most widely used ESL
Yes.
program in the world, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Is this character that is a, am I right? And so
Yeah.
you have through puppetry, you've really explored like all of these different things, that ways of teaching and connecting and communicating and being an entrepreneur and building them, like the fabrication of the puppets. And you've really experienced like this whole universe of engineering and performance and character and stuff like that. What's a part of puppetry that the public never sees? I know I've talked about a little bit of it, but like what is something that maybe you think would surprise people about this world that is a big part of what you do?
I think there's a lot more work that goes into it than you might realize. Like building a puppet at the company I work for right now, it can take weeks. It's research, tearing something apart, putting it back together, making a mock up. Like there's some incredibly talented fabricators who are building these big clients puppet projects. And it is mind boggling to see how much work goes into it. From a performance standpoint, I think one of the biggest misconceptions is you just pick it up and wiggle the dolly. There is a huge difference between having that focus and that connection. It's like acting. You see a really good performance, right? You see somebody do King Lear and it moves you. And the reason it moves you is because that performer is living and breathing and gives you everything they have to give. Puppetry can do the same thing. It can be the same experience and the same amount of work to make a character come to life and the amount of rehearsal that goes into it. If you're working with marionettes, like there's some puppeteers who their whole lifetime, that's all they do. There's a guy, his name is Philip Huber. His puppetry is amazing. It looks effortless because of how many hours of rehearsal and practice and trial and error and learning what works and what doesn't. Like you can make a puppet and try it and something is not quite right with it. Or you can try to find a character and something's not quite right with it. So you have to suss it out. You work on it. But it is the same amount of rehearsal and drive that kind of goes into any performance art, you know?
Yeah. Which character has changed you the most?
Oh man.
Yeah.
Great question. I think interestingly, they sometimes reflect who I am in the moment, right? So like Freddie the Frog, who is our world puppet, is this exuberant little kid exploring the world with exuberant little kids. And he came along like as I was in my 20s still, and I'm just trying to figure out my life in the world and thinking I'm like way more mature than I am. It was great, you know, like it really worked. There's one puppet, one show that I do that I love. It's a little hand puppet show. It's Rapunzel. And the witch in it, I think, is who I am. She wants a baby. Her whole thing is that she wants a baby so bad, but she's so misguided in how she goes about it, right? She's not a bad person. She's just misguided. And sometimes that really rings true of like, I am trying my best, but I'm going to make mistakes. And then the character that I do for the WHYY show, Albie, I don't know how they wrote me as a puppet, but they did. So like, she's a big personality, she has big feelings, but she has a very kind heart and her friends matter to her and everything. Sometimes the world is just too big. And I'm like, oh, well, yeah, that's where I'm at right now, too. But you find a piece of yourself to give to them.
Mm-hmm.
And even the hardest characters to play, like I was Ayn Rand for a show that went to London, it went to Georgia. We went to Chicago with it. But she was like the most diabolical villain in this show, and I loved playing her. I got to walk around in Brooklyn for the Philosopher's Night and just tell everybody they were wrong. And it was so much fun.
I kind of love that. I feel like maybe you should rent out that experience. You too can be Ayn Rand. I would like to do that. That would be amazing. Yeah.
It was so funny, but it was like, oh, this is not who I am at all, but this is why it's fun because these are not my beliefs, but I'm going to make people believe I believe.
Yes.
It was just so much fun.
You've actually done some really incredible things, and it's so fun to talk with you because just in sharing the experiences that you've had, you can name the big names. You can say SNL, you can say Jim Henson Project, you can say National Geographic, you can mention all of these big companies and names and name drop if you want to. You don't lead with that, you lead with the experience. And I think it's fascinating because somebody would be able to read your bio and say, oh, all she knows is success. Look at her. Look at this fantastic record. Life is just perfect and rolling out perfectly. But we know that for no one, life is always perfect. Things can go sideways. So let's talk about when the pandemic hit and what was going on with that, because that was an interesting point in your story. You had made a decision to take a leap. Take me there. Like share a little bit about what was happening at that moment.
I had been asked by the Puppet Co., which is a little puppet theater down in DC, to be the artistic director. And, talked to my husband about it because, I didn't want to be like, let's uproot and move. You got a job that he liked. So it's one of those like, all right, well, how do we figure this out? And I had literally just said, all right, I'll give this a try. I'll try to figure this out. I'll try to do the best that I can do by this. And about a week later is when the pandemic shut everything down. So, everybody was like, okay, well, what's going to happen? Oh, it's only going to be maybe for a month. Hindsight being 2020.
Yeah.
And with the founders of this little theater, they were ready to retire. What they had done is like, there were some back payments and stuff that had been cleared. They got their rent caught up, but that only left like maybe $2,000 in the bank. So it was one of those like, okay, here's the game plan if the world doesn't close.
Right.
But the world closed.
Yeah.
So I ended up basically inheriting this company as the world shut down. And all my regular puppetry jobs, everything else that I had, disappeared overnight. And this happened across the industry. Like, of course it did. Everybody who's a gig worker, everybody who does regular things in a theater, everything was gone overnight. It's when it was real creepy. I had just been in New York and Penn Station was a ghost town. So for the first few months, it was just kind of me and everything was shut down and the founders had closed out the storage space they had. So in this little theater, there were like 600 puppets that I had to figure out where they went. What I was trying to do is every 2 weeks, I was going down and I was spending a few days at a time in the playhouse because I couldn't go stay with anybody. It was just me and the puppets for a while. These puppets are gorgeous. They're stunning. They're beautiful, but they don't have eyes necessarily. The style of them is very specific. They're sculpted, but the eyes are solid colors, right? What they would do is put a gem, like a faceted acrylic in there. So at night, the acrylic would shine because it would be like the red exit light. When they retired, their board retired with them. So I went from having, a board to by July, I had to completely find a whole new board. I found people who were interested. I found somebody who could be my executive director because I was the artistic director. And basically I had to start from ground zero, from nothing. And, we got a PPP loan. It helped, like it kept us going for a little bit longer. We ended up getting a few grants that helped us. And what it was doing was giving us time to we completely painted the space. We did any upgrades the space needed. We fixed some of the tech problems that they were experiencing. it gave us time and the opportunity to make sure that when we did reopen, it was a big reopening. And somehow we made it to August of 2021. I remember, I was living in Union at that time. So it was a 4-hour drive down and a 4-hour drive back. And it was a lot.
Yeah.
But I got the theater up and I got it moving and we opened the doors. And just as expected, it took a long time for people to come back because we had COVID restrictions. The state had COVID restrictions. Federal government had COVID, so you were trying to balance it all off that. But we were working with a skeleton crew. Like I was at the time that I finally left the theater, I had 17 jobs if you broke them all out.
Yeah. Have you ever done that where you just wrote down like everything? Like I'm this, 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 this.
When you're in the moment, you're like, this just has to get done. So I just have to do it because I'm the only one who can do it. I was running full time, nonstop. I had weeks when I worked 7 days a week, but I was doing 80 to 100 hours some weeks. I was literally sleeping for 4 hours in the theater, getting up and starting over the next day because it was also building maintenance. So I was directing, I was acting in some of the shows. I was the understudy for most of the shows. I was the scenic designer, I was a scenic artist. I was the lighting designer. I was doing the lighting focus. I was doing sound. I hate doing sound. It is my least favorite thing to do, but I was doing it. Like I was figuring out how to make a projector work, I was writing new shows. I was building new puppets. I was maintaining the old puppets.
Wow.
And, through a series of like unfortunate circumstances, the executive director we had was not up to the challenge. So that almost drove the company into the ground at least once or twice. And eventually that person was replaced. But by that point, I was also doing that job sometimes. I was having to mitigate between this person and the board. And it was too much. So by the time that a new person kind of came in, I was already in burnout.
Yeah.
I didn't know it yet. I never really experienced something that hard before, but talking to a therapist, I was like on 150 milligrams of Lexapro. I was just maintaining. And it got to a point where I was in the theater all week, and then I had to take a show out on tour, and I was sleep deprived, and I ended up running my truck into a post. I was so exhausted.
Oh, I mean, you could have died.
Oh, it could have been much worse than it was. That's for
Yeah.
sure. I had to take a moment of being like, I can't keep doing this. So, we kind of made it through the year. We were still picking up the pieces, but it got to a point where they were basically like, hey, shows have been selling well. That was never a problem. It was just the overhead. It was a lot of little death by tiny cuts kind of situation. And I was just exhausted. But what ended up happening was I got offered a job working at the shop I'm working at now. And the theater was at a point of being like, we can't afford to keep you. So I was like, okay, here's what I'll do. I'll do part-time hours for the theater, but I have to go work another job because I have to live. So I was doing 40 hours at my shop, but still doing 20 hours plus for the Playhouse.
Oh my gosh.
And at one point, I had done 2 whole weeks of driving back and forth, like leaving work, driving down there, doing an overnight, sleeping 2 hours, coming back, doing a full day, going back. And then I had to go take something out on tour. So then I was in Boston, finally went up. It was hard to get it off the ground. Couldn't hire anybody to help me, didn't have the resources for it. One friend came and volunteered a lot. Her name's Dre. I love her. She's great. She helped me get to the finish line. I was exhausted. I was on the road in Boston. There was all this stuff happening. I'm trying to keep on top of the new executive director texted me something pretty offensive. Instead of having a conversation with me and being like, hey, you're overwhelmed, this person said, you're a great person, but you're bad at your job.
Whoa. And this is a point where you have just done everything and really put yourself out there. And
Yes.
instead of any kind of empathy or understanding for what might be going on,
Yep.
says this thing.
So I texted my friend on the board, sent the entire text thread and said, I'm done. And she told me, no, wait, hold on, take a deep breath, give it a day. I gave it 5 hours and I wrote my resignation to the board and I said, I'm not doing this anymore. I am killing myself for this.
Yeah.
And, over the course of that 4 years, I had my anxiety, my depression. I definitely had mental burnout, but I had physical burnout too. I ended up having a herniated disc, a second herniated disc, and I was just physically killing myself to make this thing work. And that night I sent my resignation, and by the end of the week I was done.
Wow. Yeah.
And it was so hard. Like, I loved the founders. I loved everything that they had done. I was trying so hard to find what my voice was in that space because I wanted to continue to do the shows that they had. But I wanted to elevate them in certain ways that necessarily isn't what they would want or would have wanted me to do. So there were some things with that, but everything I did, I tried to do because of how much I cared about them and that theater and how much I believed in it. The park was great. They were very enthusiastic, very helpful as much as they could be. And I had just written and completely my favorite story of all time is Alice in Wonderland. So that was the show that I got up and it was so hard to do.
Mhm.
Just me pretty much by myself trying to get it all done. But that was, walking away from something that I felt of it like I had walked away, like I had failed from something that I had put so much time and effort and love.
The worst. It's
Oh,
worse.
and it still, it still hurts. There's still days when I have to check myself because I start to get really upset where I'm like, all I wanted was for this to succeed. All I wanted was for this little theater to just keep going and to do the things, but I didn't have the right combination of time and people. Like, I had really supportive people there and the founders were supportive. I just couldn't get everybody to understand what I was needing and wanting to do, and that was hard.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
you know, I'm very thankful the shop that I work at now, Monkey Boys. They were like, "We wanna keep you, great." So I stayed on as a fabricator with them for a while, and then my little puppet show, I keep calling it little, but Albie got a second season, so I
Yeah. That's not a little puppet show, by the way.
no, it's one of those things of like, I think one of my issues is that I've always tried to not have an ego, right? But what does that lead to is it's undervaluing of myself. So I'm never really good at being like, oh, I've done these things. I'm like, oh, I've done some stuff,
Yeah.
It's an issue. I have felt like I have failed so many times that I just wanted to give up. You
Mhm.
know, this was my biggest fail. It was my biggest dream to be the artistic director of a public company, a theater, so that I could create and make and direct and watch people grow and see puppeteers, people who have an interest in this, start to develop that interest. That's something that to me that I'm really passionate about. And I had that and then go away.
That's so hard.
And it's what do you do next?
And you had your identity tied up in it too. It was a passion.
And it's your dream. What do
Yeah.
you do when you've had your dream and it slips out of your hands? And you retrospectively go back through, well, what did I do wrong? What could I have done better? Who didn't I support enough? If I had done this and this, would this person have been able to do X, Y, Z? Where
Mhm.
I realized, like, no, it takes a village.
Mhm.
It's not when you're in that situation, it takes a little bit of everybody, coming together or the circumstances or whatever it is. And it's okay to fail because you've learned something from it.
Mhm.
When you're in the middle of that, it's so hard to see any kind of silver lining.
Yeah. Well, how did what helped you to see that silver lining and to trust yourself again? Because I do think that at times like that, I feel like parallel paths, right? I feel like your story really hits home with me. And, it's like you can have all the confidence in yourself for doing all the things. You can do it all, but you can't do it all by yourself forever. And sometimes circumstances, lead you to a place that you don't necessarily want. And so there is this sort of like, I'm a good person. I do good work. I do good things. Why is this bad thing happening to me? Right? Like, how did we get so what got you to the point where you felt like, okay, I can turn the corner and I see a new vision forming for the direction I'm going in now?
I think I'm still a little in the middle of it, to be honest. I think having the job with the shop has been a big help because I needed a gentle place to land.
Mm.
People who cared about what I was and kind of, you know, I was feeling like I was worthless. I couldn't do any of these things because I was a talentless hack and couldn't do any of these things. And what they gave me at the shop is a whole bunch of creative people who are supportive of each other. It is one of the kindest places that I've worked. But also, they gave me the room to grow into a new role. So I went from being a fabricator, I had my time off to go do my show. And then when I came back, they asked me to be the shop supervisor, which is kind of like a technical director in, helping people get their projects, figure out space, maintain all of the equipment that's in the shop. And they gave me the time to kind of figure out what that meant and grow into it. And also, like, every now and then there's a puppet thing that comes up. So they stick me in a puppet to try it out. Or, oh my God, my face is right next to this thing. And this is weird. So, and then there's been like a couple of, little side projects that have come out of it. And so that having that kind of place to land and realize that I still have value
Mhm.
in this sphere has been helpful because I truly didn't know and still kind of, on the fence of what happens next. I also got to work for Arcadia. I met the folks over in that theater department, and they are such lovely people. And they gave me the chance to make puppets for this show, this big show, and they're dragons and they're monsters and they're, cool. So I pitched an idea, and the scenic designer, his name is Chris, he's awesome. He worked with me on some of the concepts, and I realized that this is what I was missing the collaborators who would talk to me and hear me out and give me ideas. And that's what I needed more than I didn't need to be an island by myself. And I was for a long time.
Yes.
Having the people to bounce ideas off of and to, recently they reached out and they're like, hey, we need this other thing. And I was like, sure, absolutely. And they're so just, it's so nice to have that, be in that sphere again. I think, we moved to this area because it was close enough for me to go to work and close enough for my husband to go to work. And it's taken us a few years, but I'm figuring out what the community here means and figuring out what the community in the Philadelphia area means. Like, what is that theater community like? And
Yeah.
it's taking some time because even though I was here and I work all the time, I was working somewhere else all the time. So, I'm still figuring it out. I still have shows that I do on my own. I'm still learning if what I really want is to run my own theater space or touring puppet shows, whatever that ends up looking like. I'm still trying to figure that out. But, I'm almost 40. Oh my God. Couple of months. I'm 40. I keep telling my therapist, I'm like, I'm 40 going on 80. And she's like, but you're not. It's when I was like, yeah, I have all this life experience. Now what can I do with it? Instead of turning it inside myself and being like, well, you're worthless and you can't. Obviously, you failed, blah, blah, blah. It's like, well, no, but where did I succeed? And how can I take that and keep moving forward and not get stuck in this mire of my own making? you know?
Right.
And I think that's hard. And I think the closer you are to that trauma for what it is, I think it's hard to see a way out for a while. And I think you need to find the people in your community who will support you and who will lift you up. And
Fascinating. That role of community in many different ways, not just like as you were speaking of, both with the collaborations, the creative collaborations that you've had, understanding that it's important to bounce ideas off of other people, and then also recognizing the importance of the community, your neighbors, the people that live around you who can support you. This is something that I've definitely struggled with too, and I'm in the process of figuring out what's the magical mix, because when you're creative, I think especially, you need time alone to be able to create. I'm not the person that wants to be surrounded by people all the time. I need my space, but I've learned I need people too, and I need to figure out how to build that collaboration into my own work that I do, because it makes it better. It makes me stronger and better. And so have you learned any secrets about how to add more of that in? How are you doing this intentionally, or are you in the middle of figuring it out?
I think one of the things that I've learned is that there's a level of forgiveness. There's forgiveness for yourself in that you are human. You will make mistakes.
Mhm.
Cannot you cannot expect a level of perfection that is unattainable, right? So it's one of those like there are things I know I could have done better. Some of the things that, when I exited the company, I know people said things that was a reaction for them being hurt, right? For them feeling lost. I've forgiven them too. I can't hold on to that because it doesn't serve me in any way.
That sounds so healthy. You sound so healthy. You're a healthy place.
Work in progress. I think part of it too is like one thing that and I'm an extroverted introvert. If you get me out in a group of people, I'm like, but otherwise, I'm like, nope, I need a blanket and I need tea and I just want to be here. I think one thing that I've started doing is I'm saying yes to more things, right? Somebody invited me out to the artist little get together this summer, and there was a big part of me that was like, yeah, but it's like at 7 o'clock at night, and I need to be in bed by 8, and blah blah blah. No, no, no. I'm gonna go. I'm gonna say yes to this, and I'm gonna go meet people, and it's gonna be fine. And I did, and it was great.
Yeah.
And when the women's club reached out, and they were like, "Do you want to come do a speech?" And I was like, "You know what? Sure, yeah, let's do this."
Best ever. Best ever, I have to say.
But it's one of those like I'm trying to be better about being outside of my comfort zone.
Mhm.
And there are days when my poor sweet husband is like, "Hey, do you want to go do things?" And I'm like, "No, I really don't." And he's like, "Think about it. I love my family. They're far away from me. I text them, I call them from time to time, but they're not in my immediate circle of people. And sometimes what you need is you need that work friend that you can just be like, I'm having a rough day. And in this moment, I'm telling you, I'm having a rough day and there's nothing you can do about it, but I just need to talk to somebody. It's allowing people in. And I think sometimes, we come up with this idea that you can't rely on other people, but that's not true. You can find the people that you can rely on. You can find the people you can trust. You can open yourself up to people. And
Yeah.
it's not always going to be about heartbreak. It's going to be about joy and it's going to be about finding those good experiences to have along the way, too. And I think it's an ongoing process. We are all works in process.
I'm in process right now.
Yeah. And we ever forward, maybe 2 steps forward and 1 step back occasionally, but it's always I think it's good to, have that introspection of here's everything that I saw and here's where I think I could have improved. And here's things that I need to process, to understand from that person's perspective and then just let go. Back in my 20s, man, I was just like, if you crossed me, the Sicilian came out. And I was like, I hate me forever. You were on my fit list. And now I'm just, but
You listen to me.
we're doing like,
Yeah.
we're good.
Yeah.
But it doesn't serve you ultimately, that doesn't help you. holding on to that just makes life more complicated. Sure, it's okay to have boundaries. You can have boundaries with people, but you don't also have to carry around all of the pain or the hurt or the upset, or you can start to figure out ways to just let it go.
Um,
One thing I have done a lot more of, got back into reading, you know,
yes.
lose yourself in a story, and I'm a storyteller, so any story is interesting to me. I dabble in a bit of everything. And I think that has helped me refine myself because I know for the last 5 years I had stopped altogether. Like I wasn't reading, I wasn't watching anything on, streaming, whatever. Wasn't going to the movies, I wasn't seeing theater.
So you're filling the well. You're fueling up. And this is an exciting time for an artist because you're filling the well. All of that stuff is in there, mixing, getting ready. And so, what's the story? You're a storyteller. What's the story that you're excited to tell next?
Oh, my friend and I have written this show and we've done it once or twice, but we want to refine it. It's called Witch Schwartzman's Halloween Spooktacular. Big Halloween fans. It has so much potential to go somewhere, but I also really want to do an adult version of the H.P. Lovecraft stories and then take proceeds and donate it towards anything that he was against. You know what I mean? Like, he was a problematic man.
You was. Admittedly, interesting storytelling.
It's interesting to me. It's like, all right, well, you were this way, but I can do something about it. Take your work. I can make money off of it. I can give it to the people who deserve it.
Ooh. I like the direction Liz is moving in. This is very exciting for sure.
Every day is a different day. So some days you wake up and you're ready, and other days you're like, nope, I want to go back into the covers.
So is that the advice you give for anyone who might be listening or watching who's lost their footing or feels like their story has gone off script? What's the truth that you'd want them to hear?
I think I want them to stop and take a breath. If you have this big dream, this big goal, this big idea, and you do it and then you lose it, it's not the end of your story. It is a moment to reflect, and that moment can last a week. That moment can last a year. That moment lasts however long your grief for that needs to last. But what happens next is up to you in terms of how you take what you've learned and use it next. So don't get lost in the grief and don't get lost in the pain of the moment. Take a breath, take a moment, learn what you need to learn, and then find your way forward. And just know you don't have to do it alone. Like, our friends are our family. They're our extended family. They're our village. They're the people who know us better sometimes than we know ourselves. So give yourself time and give yourself grace. And I think that's the big thing that people need to learn is that you have to learn how to give yourself some grace. And it takes time.